There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. This is a very special video that I'm recording on June 4th. It won't get posted for a few weeks, but I'm recording it now, and this is another box of books that I'm sending to a new Bibliophile Bestie patron over on my Patreon account. So this is the opposite of an unboxing video. This is the boxing video. I'm going to mail these to this patron probably tomorrow, certainly in the coming days. And her name is Hazel, and she lives in Connecticut, and she's my newest Bibliophile Bestie patron. The Bibliophile Bestie tier is the top tier on my Patreon, and it is $20 US a month. And for that, you get 5 books a year in the mail from me that I curate, that I choose for you, plus I read a book to you over Voxer or Facebook Messenger. And I've added a third benefit, and people can choose any 2 out of the 3, and the third one is a buddy read. Some people don't really like being read to, and other people live next door to the world's biggest bookstore and don't care about getting books in the mail from me in Saskatoon. But the 5 books in the mail, I wasn't sure how long I was going to keep going with it, but I'm going to keep going with it as one of the 3 benefits. And like I say, the patrons can choose any 2 out of the 3, because some people, like Hazel, was really digging it because she doesn't live apparently next to a fabulous bookstore or whatever. So I've had a really good time picking out books for her, and I'm going to tell you what they are and then send them in mail to her, and then once I know that she's got them, I will put this video up. So yes, I had a blast curating these. She hasn't read much Canadian literature beyond Alice Munro. I'm not giving her any Alice Munro. And Hazel also said she likes reading stuff that's a little bit off the beaten track. So with that criteria, I have found 3 works of Canadian fiction for her and 2 other books. And I wasn't sure about those 2, so I coyly asked her about them. And I'll give you more of how I was coy in my questioning when I get to those books. All right, so the first one, this is a modern classic of Canadian literature. Won the Pulitzer the year it was published, and this is the first edition, and it's in really good condition. Carol Shields' The Stone Diaries. I just love this first edition. It's probably the first Canadian edition. I have it myself, 1993, and I have a very strong memory of this book and this exact edition because in 1993 I was in Toronto as a grad student, just massively depressed by how much I hated grad school in English literature. It was just horrible. All this literary critical bullshit, theory, post-structuralist nonsense. I was just, and one day I had to put 3 essays I had to write, and I just rebelled, and I walked down the street to the This Ain't the Rosedale Library bookstore in the gay district of Toronto where I lived, and bought this and went to a cafe and started reading, because I hadn't read anything that wasn't on a course list for months, and I was starved for fiction instead of this bullshit theory. And this is the book that I rescued myself with. It's a wonderful novel, and I hope that Hazel enjoys it. The next one is a Canadian novel that I haven't read. I actually don't think this book is a Sean book. I used to have a copy, and I got rid of it without reading it. But many other people love this author and this novel. This is called The Best Kind of People by Zoe Whittall, and she is a queer Canadian writer who lives, I think, in Vancouver. And this novel came out in 2016, and I had this exact edition on my shelf, and I eventually just got rid of it because it is kind of a well, it's pre-Me Too, but it's similar themes. It's about a family where the father, who's a beloved husband, father, and teacher, gets arrested for sexual impropriety at his school. And it's about him, his wife, and their daughter, who's a high school senior. So that's a cringe-worthy premise for me. Not that the premise turned me off. There was just other things that I thought, I don't think this is going to be a book for me. But I may change my mind. I am a very different reader than I was in 2016. And maybe Hazel will read it and tell me that I should read it too. But Hazel, here it is. And the last Canadian book, I found this gorgeous copy of another Canadian classic, The Stone Angel by Margaret Laurence. Margaret Laurence is probably one of Canada's most beloved writers. She died in about 1980, in the 80s, I think, of cancer, quite young, but she wrote a series of novels that were all set in the same fictional world. The fictional small town is Manawaka, and the novels are only loosely connected, but they are connected. And this is the only one that I've read, and I read it as a high school student and loved it. I'm sure I would get a whole heck of a lot more, or very different things out of it, now that I'm in my early 30s. This is the 40th anniversary edition, and the protagonist, Hager Shipley, is a stubborn, querulous 90-year-old woman, and it's the story of her life. There's how many novels are in the Manawaka? This was the first one. So this was originally published in 1964. I'm not sure if the rest are in publication order, but there was 6 of them, loosely connected. A Jest of God, The Fire Dwellers, A Bird in the House, which I've also read. That I stand corrected. It's part of the series, and it's a collection of short stories, which I loved. And The Diviners. So 5 books, not 6 books. And this is the first one. All right, and the last 2 are books that weren't Canadian literature, and I did double check. So I'll tell you the questions I asked Hazel. I got her a really nice paperback copy of The Promise by Damon Galgut, which won the Booker in 2021. Deservedly so. I love this novel with all my heart. And I'll put a link in the show notes for anybody who's interested. I had a chat with Bob the Booker about this novel after we had both read it during Booker season that year. But I'd never seen this paperback edition. So this is set in South Africa by a white South African writer. It is probably the most incisive works of fiction that I have ever read by a white writer about race. That's all I'll say. It's a powerful, powerful novel. I'm dying to hear what Hazel makes of it. So the question I asked her was, because I said, I don't want to spoil the surprise. I also don't want to send you books that you've already read or whatever. So what Booker Prize-winning novels published in the last 10 years have you read? And I think she said she hadn't read any, so this was a safe choice. And the last book I'm sending is a gorgeous copy of one of my favorite Japanese novels, The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yōko Ogawa, translated from the Japanese by Stephen Snyder. I read this 3 or 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, fairly early in my booktube life. It was a buddy read with Jacqueline of 6 Minutes for Me, and we both loved this novel. And when I saw this really beautiful used book that was in such good shape. The only thing about used books is a couple of them have the previous owner's name written in ink, but other than that, it's in pristine condition. I don't think that Catherine Robertson even read it, although she may be a reader like me where you can't tell if it's been read or not because I take such good care of books while I'm reading them. Anyway, it is about a housekeeper and a professor, and the professor, what's the right term? After a traumatic head injury years ago, this professor has only 80 minutes of short-term memory. So every 80 minutes, if you spend an hour and a half with him, he has no idea who you are after 80 minutes. Like, he just resets. So the housekeeper comes to his house every morning with her young son, and reintroduces herself, and has to keep reintroducing herself throughout the day. And it's the relationship of her like 7 or 8 year old son, and the professor. And it's just a beautiful, heartwarming, very, very gorgeously written literary story. I loved it with all my heart. So that's what Hazel's getting from me, and I can't wait to hear what she thinks of these. And that's the video. Thanks for watching.